Matt Baker covers quite a bit for the Tampa Bay Times, but also part of that is USF, the Bulls. And yesterday, the announcement, Gerry Bohanon, QB1. And, of course, we know a great deal about Gerry and happy for him. Matt, thanks for your time on Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports. This wasn't a surprise at all, but was it a freebie? Is it a gimme, or was this a pretty tough competition?
Yeah, I was not surprised at all. I'll be honest. Obviously, you guys know Bohanon well. When he had his first kind of media availability, just before the start of camp, I called my boss afterward just to debrief, and I said, he's the guy. I don't need to see him throw in practice, but he's the guy. You can just tell he has a poise about him. I hate the whole it factor thing, but he has an it factor around him that you can tell he's somebody this team's going to gravitate around, and lo and behold, they already have. I mean, before the start of camp, again, this is a guy who came in the summer, had never practiced yet with the Bulls, and on the eve of camp, USF asked everybody on the offense, name the three guys that are the leaders of this offense. And Bohanon had the third most votes on the offense. And none of the other quarterbacks got a single vote. That's just the type of presence that he has, the kind of intangible, innate leadership that he has. And in addition to the fact that he completed 80% of his passes in camp, made 90% of the correct reads, all that type of stuff, that he's a good player. You guys know that. But the leadership, to me, made it pretty clear, like, he was going to be the guy. And now, USF's incumbent quarterback, Tim McLean's in the transfer portal.
How much does Jeff Scott, not just with Gerry, but with other guys that he brought in, need those glue guys, given the fact that it hasn't gone his way yet?
Yeah, absolutely. He needed some veteran leadership. He needs somebody who can turn things around. Because honestly, with the Bulls, there hasn't been a lot to get excited about in his tenure. He's 3-18. You can give him a COVID mulligan in 2020. I do, given the situation. And you can look at some of the incremental things. They weren't blown out in a whole lot of games last year. They were competitive with Houston. They were competitive with BYU. They were competitive against Cincinnati for the most part, which were three good teams. So you can look and see some progress. And you can look at the roster and just watch them in practice and see that they're better now than they were a year ago, which is better than they were a year before that. But at some point, it's got to show up. At some point, they need some proof of concept victory. Something's got to happen on the field so that people can get excited about this program. Because, look, there's a lot of good things they're doing with the indoor practice facility going to open here in a couple months. Within the next month or so, next couple weeks, they should announce something about an on-campus stadium and the real concrete plans to do this and a budget and timeline and all that stuff. There's a lot to get excited about, just the team isn't there yet. And that's why a guy like Bohanon is pivotal, because he's somebody that the locker room can rally around, the fan base can look at him and trust in what he did at Baylor and think he can do that at USF. And then you add in some of the transfers they brought in. The DN from Missouri, the defensive lineman from UNC, and some of those guys, they brought in players that make you think this team, I'm not going to say they're going to win the conference, but you can see things getting better and a bowl being a realistic possibility for them this year.
That smile of his, that doesn't mean you can throw it well, doesn't mean you can lead a team, but how dynamic and a bright sunshine is just Gerry's face and smile?
No question. I remember somebody asked him, what's the first thing you're going to do on practice? This was just before the start of camp. What's the first thing you're going to do when you go into the huddle with the first team for the first time as a USF quarterback? He said, smile. I'm like, and then he said something else, like, you're just going to smile? He's like, yeah. And at that point, I was like, okay, I get it. He's got an infectious personality. And again, does that mean they're going to go 10-2? No, it does not. Does that mean he's going to meet his goal of passing for 2,000 or 3,000 yards, rushing for 1,000 yards, scoring 40 touchdowns this year? No, it does not. If he can't read a defense, it doesn't matter. If USF can't put him into position to make plays, it doesn't matter. If the offensive line's not better, if the receivers can't get open down the field, none of that matters. But if he can, just his personality can light up a room and get guys to believe. Look, USF was in a lot of close games last year. They had one score against BYU, down to the wire against Tulsa, competitive toward the end against Houston, down to the last couple of plays against UCF. If his personality and the kind of getting everybody on his back can be the difference between winning or losing a couple of those games, it's a different story with USF, and that might be just the spark that they need.
Matt, who will be the best college football team in Florida this year?
Miami, and I don't think it's particularly close. And I've got the Canes. I think I've got them 15 on my AP top 25 ballot, somewhere in that 14 to 17 range. I don't feel great about it. I really like Mario Cristobal as a coach. He's a proven commodity. He did well enough at Oregon to make me think he knows what he's doing, and he's recruiting at a high level. I think the defense is going to be better, and really Tyler Van Dyke, I think he's going to be the best player in the state. Certainly he's the player I have the most confidence in of him being a high-end player that we're talking about as an all-conference guy. Still concerns about the defense considering how they were last year. Concerns about playmakers. They don't have a lot of offensive dudes, particularly that receiver, the way a Miami team should. But given where everybody else is in the state, Florida I don't think is going to be very good. FSU will be better, but still not very good. USF's a ways away. UCF will be fine, not great. Yeah, give me the Canes out of the bunch.
Yeah, better for FSU is a very short mountain to climb.
Well, Matt, you know this. He's an FSU grad, and, it's amazing because there's so much talent in that state. And up until when Florida State and then Miami made their runs, and Florida was good, but then it was like all the great Florida players, it's not like they were leaving the state, but they were going everywhere. Has that been the case again, or are these teams just going through transition of coaching changes?
It's a lot of things. One is just look at the way recruiting has changed over the years, where, in the 90s, you could have a really good player at Armwood High School just here in Tampa that a lot of guys wouldn't know about. And Florida State, Miami would have a leg up on getting to know this guy. And then when it comes signing day, that's the difference between them getting them in Georgia. And it's not that way anymore. Nobody gets hidden. Guys go to camps and all that stuff and combines, and everybody in the world, everybody in the country can know about this 3-star at Armwood that 20 years ago nobody would have known. It's so much easier to recruit nationally. You can reach out to anybody instantly on social media. The allure of staying in state doesn't matter as much when it's easier to fly across the country, and mom and dad can watch all my Minnesota games on the Big Ten network. Like, all that kind of stuff adds up. And it's not one problem, it's a whole bunch of problems. In addition to the Big Three fell behind facilities. Their coaching hires have stunk, generally speaking, for the last, certainly decade, probably longer than that. So all those little things add up to the point where it's a situation where the Big Three is not getting the in-state talent the way they used to, or at least they weren't. I think we're seeing progress from Billy Napier at Florida and Mario Cristobal at Miami, at least in kind of the 23 class here.
If you had to rate, you mentioned Miami at the top. Florida State and Florida are trying to get their mojo back. UCF is obviously blowing up. And yes, they are a very confident bunch, and they're getting better with Malzahn. How would you rate those four going into the season?
Yeah, so Miami is 1. I would take Florida State 2, not by a lot. I feel more confident in Mike Norvell in his third season than I do the other one. Jordan Travis, when he's been able to stay healthy at quarterback, he's at least a good, maybe a very good college quarterback. He can run really well. He's gotten better as a thrower. I have major concerns at receiver with them, and on the offensive line where they've struggled really since the last couple year or so of Jimbo. But I think they're getting better. I think if I had to pick, I think I'd pick UCF third, but Florida's right there. Gus obviously has a little bit of a head start just in terms of where that program is and his tenure there as opposed to Billy Napier. But the wild card in the state, and really one of the most, I think, interesting players in the country, is Anthony Richardson, the Gators quarterback. We have seen him play at an extremely high level where he has Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson type ability. And I do not say that lightly at all. Lamar is one of the best players I've ever seen with my own eyes. And so I don't put him in that category lightly. But what he can do with the hurdles, with his just running ability, ability to run away from people, his cannon of an arm, he has that kind of ability. But I think he's completed 39 career passes, 7 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions, something like that. So we haven't seen enough of it yet. If he plays up to his potential, we could be talking about Florida winning 8-9 games and things looking pretty good. If he remains inconsistent and throws too many interceptions, then we could be talking about the Gators in that 4-8, 5-7 range. We're somewhere in the middle.
Matt, thank you very much. You mentioned USF and what they're trying to do, the stadium and all of that. There was at least a discussion in the middle of the fall after the Big 12 gobbled up Houston, UCF, Cincinnati and Brigham Young, that there could be more. And, of course, that's been derailed because of the college football playoff and now whatever else is going on. How much hope is there that USF one day will be included in all that?
There's hope, for sure. If you talk to USF fans, I think their biggest fear is, let's say they don't get better this year or don't get much better. And who knows how this realignment is going to shake out. But the ultimate fear is they spend, I'm going to throw out a figure, $350 million over the next few years to build this stadium that they should have had a long time ago. And they build this super nice state-of-the-art stadium and everything's great. And they're doomed to a generation of trying to fill it against Charlotte and Florida Atlantic and Rice and those guys. So you spend $350 million for what? That's kind of the worst case scenario. But the best case scenario, look, I still think college football is going to matter outside the Power 5 and outside the Power 2. So maybe USF spends all this money. Maybe Jeff Scott is the guy. And he might be, for all we know. It's still too early to tell in my book. And they make some serious progress. They continue to recruit better and improve the culture. They get the facilities in place. And you can see USF finally waking up and living up to that potential they had in 2007 when they went to number 2 in the country. So there's definitely some enthusiasm around the Bulls that maybe that dream scenario can happen. And who the heck knows with how things shake out. It's going to be a Power 2. Maybe that expands. Maybe there's an unofficial relegation promotion system like they have in soccer. So there's all sorts of scenarios where you could still see USF competing at a high level down the line in a different system.
Matt, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Matt Baker, Tampa Bay Times, covers USF and also other colleges throughout the state of Florida. But the main reason is to discuss Gerry Bohanon, and everything he said about Gerry, none of that is surprising. None of it is surprising what he was able to do at